Hello, in this video I'll show you how to replace the clutch and flywheel on Ford Transit 2.4 liters DI. The transmission on this van is located on the rear of the engine. That's the transmission right there. In order to get access to the clutch, we need to separate the transmission from the engine and just move it back a little bit. We don't need to remove it completely, just move it back a little bit. In order to do that, we need to remove a couple of stuff. We need to remove this transmission mount first, those bolts and the two bolts on the bottom. We also need to remove the propeller shaft. This propeller shaft is held by 4 bolts on this side towards the transmission. We also need to remove that electrical connector. There's another electrical connector right there that we need to remove. We also need to remove this brake line that goes into the slave cylinder. To remove the brake line, this is the clamp, the metal clamp that we need to remove, and then pull out the brake line. We also need to remove all the bolts holding the transmission to the engine. There is 2 there, 2 on this side, and then there is 2 other bolts on top. One of the bolts is there on top and the other one is on the other side. We also need to disconnect the gear lever from the transmission. We do that from the top of the car. To disconnect the gear lever, first we need to bring those plastic rubber covers up, and afterwards this gear lever is held by 4 bolts that we need to remove. If the video is useful, please like and comment on the video and subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this. Now I'll show you the 4 bolts that we need to remove. Here are the 4 bolts, 2 on one side, 2 on the other side. And that's the gear lever out. Next, we're going to remove the prop shaft from the van. We need to remove those bolts. Here for the center bearing, the 2 bolts we need to remove. 2 bolts for the other center bearing. And the prop shaft that's held onto the rear differential. We need to remove those bolts as well. I've already marked where exactly the prop shaft is sitting on the transmission and on the differential. Later on I'm going to put it in exact position. Now that I've removed all the bolts holding the prop shaft, I'm going to put it to the side. Next I'm going to remove the two electrical connectors, this one and the one on top of the transmission. Next I'm going to remove these two bolts for the transmission mount. I'm not removing the other two bolts, but it might be easier to move the transmission if you remove the other two bolts that are on top of the transmission mount. I'm going to remove them later on when I'm trying to put the transmission back onto the engine. Next I'm going to catch this brake line for the slave cylinder with locking pliers so that no brake fluid flows through there when I remove the brake line from the slave cylinder. Next I'm going to remove this metal clamp and pull out the brake line. Next I'm going to remove all the bolts holding the transmission to the engine. There is like 6 or 7 bolts, 6 or 8 bolts that we need to remove. I'm not showing you exactly how I do them because I'm doing the job in the canal and there is not much space to film everything, but they're not that the only two bolts that are harder to get are the ones that I'm showing you right now. They're the ones on top. You just need long extension and with pneumatic gun they go easily. Now I've already removed all the bolts, so now I'm just going to separate the transmission from the engine. You want to get a second person to help you. Somebody will need to get a pry bar and just put the pry bar in between the transmission and the engine and try to separate it. And from the bottom, that's what I'm doing. I'm just trying to pull it towards me with a pry bar again. It started to come out harder, but eventually it will come out. Here you can see the transmission has already separated from the engine, but we needed to separate it way more. So we're going to continue pulling it out with a pry bar. You can use your hands to lift it a little bit from here, from the back, while somebody in the front pries it out. It doesn't seem to work just like how I've done it with the pry bar, so I'm going to get a transmission jack and try to lift the engine a little bit, and this way it will free the transmission. Look where I'm putting the transmission jack. Exactly on the engine, just where it's separating from the transmission. I'm going to lift it up a little bit, the engine, and then the transmission will lift up as well, and then we'll be able to wiggle it out. Again, you need another person to go in the back just to wiggle it a little bit to come out. And here with a pry bar, and from the back as well, and it's going to come out. You can see how it's coming out. It came out a little bit more, but we need it a little bit more to come out so that we can get access to the clutch. I think that's as far as it can move. Now we're going to remove the transmission jack, and the whole engine will go down, and now we'll get access to the clutch. This is the clutch, and these are all the bolts that we need to remove. When you try to loosen the bolts, probably the whole crankshaft will be turning, so in order to hold the crankshaft, we will get a big ratchet and hold it where the crankshaft pulley is on one of the bolts there. You can get somebody to hold the crankshaft while you try to loosen the bolts on the clutch and then on the flywheel. You'll only be able to get the bolts on the bottom, so when you loosen the bolts on the bottom, just get whoever is helping you just to turn the crankshaft so that the clutch rotates, and then you can get the rest of the bolts. Now that I've loosened all the bolts, I'm going to get an electric ratchet and remove the bolts faster. Now that all the bolts holding the clutch are removed, I'm going to take out the clutch. And that's the clutch out, that's the clutch pressure plate and the friction plate. And this is the bearing that we need to remove as well and replace. To remove it, you just need to pull out the fork, and then the bearing will separate. Next, we're going to remove the flywheel. These are all the bolts holding the flywheel in there. To loosen those bolts, again, I'm going to use this ratchet to hold the crankshaft so that I can loosen the bolts. Once I loosen the bolts, then I will be able to remove them with the ratchet. Now that all the bolts are loosened, I'm going to remove them completely with the electric ratchet. Now that all the bolts are removed, I'm going to take out the flywheel. If it's stuck in there, you might want to get a pry bar. If it doesn't work with one pry bar, maybe get two pry bars. There is one metal pin in there that probably is harder to take it out from there, but it will come out eventually. You can see with one pry bar doesn't work, so I'm going to get another one just to make it easier. With the two pry bars, just pry it out from both sides simultaneously, and it will come out. And that's the flywheel out. Now I'm going to replace them with new flywheel and clutch. This is the new flywheel and clutch kit. This is the part number for it. And this is the flywheel and also the clutch pressure plate and the friction plate. I've already put the tool for centering the pressure plate and the friction plate, but you see that it's not going to work here because there's not much space to put it in there. First I'm going to put the bearing on. You might want to put some grease before putting on the bearing on. So you pull out the fork a little bit, and you see it click into its two teeth on the two sides, and then you bring the fork back onto its place. You can see the bearing is in there. Next I'm going to put some grease on the threads. Next I'm going to put the flywheel on. This is the pin that I was talking about that was making harder for the flywheel to come out. That's where it's located on the flywheel. Make sure you put it in its exact place, the flywheel. And after putting it on, you can put the bolts on and tighten them. The flywheel is very heavy, so you might want to get somebody to help you to hold the flywheel while you try to put on the bolts. Now that the flywheel is on, I'm going to put on the bolts and tighten them. Next, I'll show you in the service manual the tightening torques for the flywheel and the pressure plate. For the flywheel is 25 Newton meters, then 40 Newton meters, and then 48 degrees. For the clutch pressure plate, it's 29 Newton meters. Next, I'll put the clutch pressure plate and the friction plate back on, but I've already put this centering tool, but it's not going to work in my case, like I said before, because there's not much space to put it in. So I'm just going to remove it and put first the friction plate and then the pressure plate. Make sure you put the friction plate with the gearbox side facing the gearbox, and now we're going to put the pressure plate. When you put on the friction plate, there is not much movement, so in most cases you might want to move it maybe just a couple of millimeters in order to center it. You see how it is. When you put on the pressure plate, then we're going to put on the bolts and tighten them. When you're tightening the bolts on the pressure plate, don't tighten them all at once. Tighten them a little bit, all the bolts a little bit, and until you tighten them completely. Now I'm going to tighten them to 29 Newton meters. Again, if the crankshaft is turning, just get somebody to hold the crankshaft pulley on the front with the ratchet, and then this way you'll be able to tighten the pressure plate and also the flywheel. Now that the clutch is replaced, next I'm going to put the transmission back onto the engine. First I'm going to remove those two bolts for the engine, for the transmission mount, and remove the transmission mount. And I'm going to put it on afterwards when I put the transmission back on. This way it will be much easier to put the transmission because there is more space on the bottom. Now I'm going to lift up the engine again with the transmission jack, and then I'm going to start putting in the transmission. You can see how I lifted the engine. Now I'm going to lift up the transmission on the front and on the rear. Get somebody to help you again to put it on, and with two pry bars you should be able to go in. Maybe bring up and down the engine with the transmission jack, just as needed. Now I'll show you how it's going in. It's almost in, it's already on the threads, so now we're going to put the bolts on and tighten them one on this side, one on the other side. When it's on the threads, just start tightening a little bit and the whole transmission will go in all the way. And that's how you replace the clutch on this Ford Transit. Hopefully the video was helpful. Please like and comment on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.